Hi there, we are at the YMCA today, and with us we have Danaifer Mirza,
Hello.
Suresh Gulrajani, and
Hello.
colleague Paul George, who also is the CEO of YMCA. We are going to have a freewheeling chat with him today about his work and life at the YMCA. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for speaking with us. So, can we begin with a little bit about yourself, your early years, your childhood, etc.?
Well, that's a good way to start it. Born and brought up in Bombay, way back in 1959. Makes me a senior citizen now. 62 years. Studied in Bombay Scottish. Did my graduation from Bombay University. And then had the good fortune of joining this great institution. It's a global institution which is close to 177 years old. The Bombay YMCA itself is about 146 years. We've been in the city catering to all strata of society. So it's a privilege to be part of this great institution, which I have served now close to 40 years.
That's a really long journey. So, colleague Paul George, tell me, you started in 1982.
Right.
And we're in 2021. 40 years is a very long time. What are the challenges? What is the journey been like?
The journey has been one which I look back with a tremendous amount of satisfaction. When I joined the YMCA, I had no clue that I would be spending that many years in this institution. But as I went along, this institution grew on me, and I didn't want to join any other place despite several offers that came my way. I had the great experience of working with young people. I had the experience of working with orphans and then with homeless women. It's been a journey which has had its more share of ups than downs. So looking back, as I come close to the fag end of my career, in fact within another 40 odd days I'll be finishing, laying down office. Many things have happened. There have been significant milestones in my career, and when I look back, I feel a tremendous sense of satisfaction. At times I felt I should have joined the YMCA earlier.
So, at a time when a lot of people stepped into careers like banking and mainstream careers, what made you take up something that was not so conventional at the time?
Yeah, that's a very interesting story. I had no clue. In fact, I had no clue that I would be joining the Y. I had gone for a couple of interviews in the corporate world, and things didn't work out. I had a medical condition which prevented me from taking a corporate career. So I was then introduced to the YMCA by a very dear family friend of ours. And I did it purely because my father asked me to go and participate in the interview. And I did this more to appease him than anybody else. But I had a super boss, kept me entrenched in the YMCA. And I'm so grateful for this man, Mr. C.P. Porthan by name. And I'm the last of his recruits. After me, a new generation starts. So I have not regretted the fact that I was not part of the corporate world.
That's great, that's great. So, what have been some of the challenges? What are the changes that you've seen in the mindset of, everyone, right from the students at the YMCA to the donors and everyone? What is the change in mindset that you've seen in the last 40 years?
The YMCA was predominantly looked upon as a male-centric place where young boys came and played their games in the early 80s. There was not much as participation of women or young girls. It's in the 90s that we saw this huge surge. I think it's after what was the impact of globalization, and we had the TV screens come alive with lots of basketball and football, and those kind of things attracted the young people. And coincidentally, just as a trivia question, you know, basketball was introduced to the world by the YMCA. It goes back to 1894 in Springfield, Massachusetts, where the first game of basketball was invented. It's now become a great sport, a multi-billion-dollar sport, and we take great credit in the fact that the YMCA was part of that very popular game. So then we had a surge of young girls coming in. Table tennis, we've produced champions by the dozens. And then there was a golden era of the YMCA in the mid-80s when our swimming team was the best. And we amongst the swimming team, we had Chhatrapati award winners, we had Arjuna award winners. Basketball, we were the nursery in the ghetto place like Nagpada and Agripada and those places which were deemed to be places of nefarious activities. We have pulled out young people from a life of crime to a life where they have been productive citizens of the country. Some of them have even represented the country and even captained the national team. So we have some great success stories here. We have table tennis champions, we have swimming champions, we have basketball people, and so the YMCA has over a period of time impacted a lot of lives.
That's very true. So today it's an era where you have a lot of these high-end clubs, recreational clubs. What sets the YMCA apart?
The YMCA is a place what we like to call as a home, a home away from home. It's actually a one-stop place for the family. So if you brought your child and the child could go and play basketball, you could go to the fitness center, or you could do some music or dance classes. So the father could go to the gym, the mother could do some cooking classes, the daughter could do some dance classes, the boy would play his basketball. So it was a family stop, and that's how, and it was very affordable. You mentioned clubs. We don't charge 50 lakhs to get a membership. Our fees is something probably everybody would laugh at. A young child at today's rate, and I'm talking about the 80s, it was minuscule. Today the child can get into, a young child below the age of 18 is less than 2 rupees a day. For 700 rupees he gets to play all these facilities. That's the kind of thing.
Yes.
We made it affordable. We said it's a fitness for all, wellness for all. That was our mantra. And so we have great number of members who use our facilities at very, very rates which you can say is affordable even for the poor.
World-class wellness at affordable rates.
Absolutely, you put it absolutely right. I mean, that's very succinctly put. And if you look at our facilities also, while it may not be high-end, but it's really good equipment, very comfortable ambience that we provide. More importantly, and I want to emphasize this, it's a very, very safe place. You can send your daughter, your sister, your mother. There is a zero tolerance for any kind of nonsense. I mean, we don't. That's why the number of young people, especially girls, using the place has grown phenomenally. And that's the change that I have seen over the years.
Okay. Wow. So how many centers do you have across Bombay today?
We have about 16 branches and centers, but we've not set any geographical limits. We've gone into the satellite city. We are in Navi Mumbai, in a big presence. We have a hostel there for about 140 students and working men. We have a swimming pool there. So that doesn't stop us. But recently, Sidco gave us a property near Kargar, which is now the happening place. You have the airport coming up, and Sidco came in and asked us whether we would be interested in having a plot of land. It's not too big a plot of land, but nonetheless, we are now planning to have an indoor sports complex, and not the traditional table tennis and we're going to have rifle shooting, we're going to have archery, and a climbing wall which is going to be 30 foot tall. So it's a new concept that we're bringing to the people in Kharghar.
That's really lovely. So tell me a little bit about the fundraising activities that you're involved in.
The Bombay YMCA is one example of being a sustainable non-profit. Over the period of time, we felt we are not worth our name and salt if we cannot generate funds on our own. We don't receive funds from abroad. We absolutely no funds come from abroad. That's a misconception that most people have, that the YMCA, being an international organization, would be getting funds from abroad. No, we don't. I think the last time we received any kind of funding was during the time of the earthquake. That's in the 90s. And that's because it was a global disaster and people wanted us to be involved in the rehabilitation process. But otherwise, we have our own units which kind of, profit is a taboo word in the non-profit sector. So we have what is known as surplus centers and deficit centers. So what's an example of a surplus center? We have this international house which is run like a 3-star hotel. We have very well-appointed rooms, air conditioned. We have conference facilities for various capacities. You could start with 25 and you could have a conference facility for 175. We have dining hall facilities. So most of the pharmaceutical companies, most of the corporates use this place as a training center because they get the best of the resource persons in the city. So on a national level, they get all their staff to come here. So this, in many ways, was a flourishing place until pandemic hit. So we're now in the throes of trying to do a recovery. We are in recovery mode. And then we have our hostels. We have working men's hostels, we have student hostels, and these are again facilities at nominal costs, but we don't make a loss, nor do we make substantial profits or substantial surpluses. Then what do we do with the surpluses that we have? So we have what will be known as the deficit center. You probably heard of the YMCA Boys Home. That's the place where we have orphan kids. We have about 55 of them who stay with us from the age of 4 to 18, food, clothing, education, everything is being taken care, absolutely free of cost. We have a street children project which is on the beach itself at Juhu, and very recently, just about 4 years ago, the BMC tied up with us, and we have a shelter for homeless women and children, and it's very aptly called Sharan, a shelter. And we have people from all over the place who run away from home, have victims of domestic violence. So that's again been a new foray for us. So our surpluses that are generated are plowed into these kind of centers. We also have a major program known as the preschool education. Young kids from the age of 2.5 to 4.5 before they get their admission in schools. Now, how is it that we are reaching out to the community? Now, the early days, we used to be very happy that the YMCA had about 20,000 or 30,000 people use the facilities, till some wise people in the board actually turned around and says, you're putting all these figures in the annual report and saying 20,000 people use their facilities. There's 200,000 that don't even know about the YMCA. So from being a building-centric institution, we went to building the community. So grassroots level work began. So we went into healthcare in a big way. There was what we call the Arogya Kendra, which was actually a mother and child prenatal, postnatal care that we provided. And that became a big success with the community. And health was tackled on a very holistic way. There was nutrition, there was health and hygiene, there was sanitation. And those days we talked about AIDS awareness. So it was a very holistic approach that the YMCA took to health. And we also have vocational training centers. Now, long before vocational training centers, our vocational training skills program, which is now high on the agenda, the YMCA was a pioneer. We started vocational training way back in the early 90s, and nobody talked about vocational training. So this we reached out to school dropouts. In those days they had the ITI, and they insist on a 10th fail. I still remember this very vividly. And we as a core group sat down and says, 10th fail? What about the guy who drops out after the 7th or the 8th standard? Where does he go? So we knew we had a segment that was not being catered to, and we started our first vocational training center in a municipal school with just 2 classrooms. We then went on to have 10 classrooms, and then subsequently we had our own vocational training center, which are building by itself, which is along the boys' home. So the kids, after their academics, they could go and pick up a vocational skill, which would stand them in good stead when they moved out of the home. So then those vocational training centers multiplied. So now we have a center in Bombay Central, we have a center in Bandra, we have a center in Ghatkopar, and of course the big one at Andheri. So, but we didn't stop there. We can all rest on our laurels, and we said, look, you got the expertise in the urban setup, what are you doing for the rural youth? And that's when about 2 or 3 years ago we started this massive project in a place called Khane, which is very close to Vadgaon, and we had land over there, and we built a beautiful institute. We've kind of upgraded ourselves from a center to an institute, and we built about 24,000 square feet, and we're going to have all kinds of vocational training skills for the rural youth, which would include farming and cooperative societies, because we are in the midst of farmland there. So this has been what the YMCA has been doing. We've not stopped. I think in the early days we were an island city YMCA, just 4 YMCAs. And then there was a sudden kind of, when people moved into the suburbs, that's where the YMCA found itself. We need to be where the people are. And so the YMCA moved into the suburbs. We had Andheri, we had Bandra, we had Chembur, we had Ghatkopar. We now have Borivali. So there has been a growth, and without being unduly modest, it has been a phenomenal growth. And we're very happy about it.
Absolutely. So you're a name to reckon with in your area of work. Tell us a little about the awards and recognitions that you've been honored with.
They have come over the years. I've not really looked at awards, but I suddenly find when I look back that there are awards which I cherish. And the one that comes to mind immediately is the UNESCO award. That was a very, very prestigious award. We had restored a heritage building, our own building at Student YMCA at Lamington Road. We had funding from the US Consulate. The Bombay YMCA plowed in a substantial sum of money, and the end product was so beautiful that the UNESCO had to recognize us with an award, which occupies a pride of place for me, and that's one big award. Of course, there have been many awards from the Rotary, both at my club as well as at the district level. Numerous awards from the YMCAs, from different YMCAs across the country. So it's been a journey, as I said earlier, milestones, important events have taken place. I've been part of history. I think there was a reference made to a photograph in my office which dates back to 1994, which was a world conference, and we had about 900 people there, and that was captured in a beautiful photograph. So I had the opportunity to have time with the Duke of Edinburgh at a tea party that was hosted. So that's another milestone. And that was the occasion, the 150th anniversary of the YMCA. Then we had the occasion to be on another important or historic event. It was the 50th anniversary of the Asia Alliance of the YMCAs. To understand that the YMCA being a global institution, we have our national headquarters in Delhi, the Asian headquarters in Hong Kong, and the global headquarters or the world headquarters in Geneva. So the Asian Alliance of YMCAs was celebrating the 50th anniversary, and I again coincidentally happened to be present. So when we trace back the journey that has been spanning close to 40 years, these things come to mind.
Beautiful. What a lovely journey indeed. Now, tell me a little bit about your personal life, your personal space. I believe conservation is something that's very close to your heart. Would you like to speak a little bit about that?
Conservation, I think that actually comes from my genes. My grandfather was somebody who, he was not an architect, but he was attached to the Maharaj of Travancore. All his properties were maintained by my grandfather. I was told this much later. I did not know about it till I actually got into conservation of buildings. But I had good friends along the way who were conservation experts. One of them was Vikas Dilavri. So we worked together on a couple of projects, and we were recognized not only by UNESCO but also the local bodies. The YMCA turned around a building which was actually dilapidated, and so the YMCA has not spared any efforts to maintain these heritage buildings. And that's the good part of the YMCA. It didn't fall for the temptation that we could bring a building down and raise a modern building. We've retained the heritage culture of the city, and we felt it was our duty to preserve that. So so about three heritage buildings. Hopefully I've left a small imprint over there. One in Colaba, one at Lamington Road, and the other one at Proctor YMCA. These are buildings which I was personally involved in. Most satisfying because even the heritage furniture, things like a hat stand and a revolving bookshelf, Belgian glass mirrors, you don't see this anymore, but we have retained it. The YMCA has taken good care of the property that it had received.
So, what are your personal passions and interests?
Well, I'm in many ways a nature lover. So I used to like my treks. In the early part of my career, we used to do a lot of camps, and some of my predecessors had the vision to buy a huge campsite, which is, as mentioned, in Nilchi, which is close to Lonavala. We've got 55 acres out there, surrounded by water on three sides. It's a beautiful place to go to, lush greenery, waterfalls along the way. You can do archery, you can do rifle shooting, you can climb a wall, you can do a zip line, you can do rafting. All these things make for a great place. So a lot of people now are inclined to take a break from city life and spend some time in the midst of nature. And I think that is a worthwhile proposition for us, something that we need to spend more time publicizing and getting people to know this place, which is, to my mind, paradise on earth.
Absolutely. So we're so honored and fortunate to have you as a member of the Skål International Mumbai South 732 Club. Tell us a little bit about your experience with SIMS 732.
Okay, so Skål again was a new experience. We run this international house, so we were part of the tourism industry, and a good friend of mine, Jason, suggested that I should be part of the Skål. So it's been now 2.5 or 3 years since I've been there. I found that very invigorating when we hear experiences of people in the travel industry, people in the hospitality industry, and they were willing to share of themselves in terms of their experience and expertise. So it's been a learning curve for me as well. But what happened recently was more satisfying. Skål started what was known as their CSR projects. And the very first CSR project that Skål did was with our children at the street children at Juhu. And I think they got encouraged by visiting the YMCA there, and they wanted to do something bigger. So I said, from Juhu, if you can take a 10-minute drive, we'll come to one of our jewels of the YMCA. And everybody was excited. What's this jewel that he's going to show us? So I said, look, I'm not going to show you one jewel, I'm going to show you 55 jewels. And these are 55 kids who stay with us from the age of 4 to 18. And it got everybody excited. And this 15th of August, we had nearly about 12 people from Skål come and spend some time with the children. And they donated a substantial number of computers. As you're aware, online is the order of the day. And we needed computers and tablets, and Skål came and said, look, we're going to give this to you. Oh, you're talking about the computers and thing. Let me tell you, it had I'm used to the word of ripple effect, so I'm going to change that. It didn't have a ripple effect, it had a cascading effect. And many people wanted to host lunches and dinners for these children, birthdays and anniversaries, so our book is getting full. We now, if you want to book lunch, you'll have to check whether lunch is available.
Wow.
So many of the colleagues of ours said, look, they were booking death anniversaries, birthdays, and they said they would come there and spend time with the children. For me, that's more important. The children are a bit starved of love and affection. So when you spend time and give them emotional support, more than I've never made a plea for cash. I believe that's outdated. If I can get people to donate in kind not just in grains but in time, that would be the biggest contribution that Skål can make. But I can't stop about Skål because just a week ago, Sahara Star, under the leadership of Manish Sodhi, the CEO, have now started delivering a weekly meal. And this is a commitment that they've made for a year. We must acknowledge Sahara Star, and this is part of Skål's CSR initiative. And I'm so grateful that they thought that the YMCA was a fitting recipient of this generosity. So children are looking forward not just to the food, they want all the uncles and aunties from Sahara Star to come there and spend some time, which they've promised to do. So I'm so happy that Skål has taken this initiative. We're going to try and interest them for something for the homeless women. Not to sound too greedy, but I think they've done a lot. But if they want another bouquet in their portfolio, they could be also seen to be reaching out to homeless women.
That's beautiful. So such an illustrious journey. Such an illustrious journey indeed. Is there any message that you would like to give to people who would be your successors, people who would be wanting to enter your kind of space of work?
Okay, so the Bombay YMCA has a beautiful succession line. I mean, we don't really have to worry. We're good for a good 30 or 40 years, and we've got very gender sensitive. The YMCA was a male bastion. We now have 3 executives who, at some point in time, will be sitting in my chair, and it's a big first for them. So gender diversity is one thing. So in terms of succession, the board has got it all figured out. Message for the youth, I'm going to encourage them, if it's reaching them and they're hearing me, I would like them to take to the non-profit sector. There's ample scope, there's the kind of satisfaction you probably wouldn't get at the corporate level. But here, I used to go home and look back at the day, and I used to get immense satisfaction. I must also confess, I have cried. Things don't go the way you want it to go. Children don't, especially at the boys' home. Children come from a different background, so sometimes it doesn't work out always, and they're not academically inclined. From our family point of view, we want them, they should get 80s and 90s and all that. But I suddenly realized they were good with their hands, and that's where the vocational training skills came. So there are days when you are on top of the world, there are days when you feel, oh dear, it's not panned out as the way you want. But at the end of it, when you look back, everything works out in such a mysterious way that you really can't fathom how this all has happened, and all for the good. So I would encourage young people to look at the non-profit sector a little more closely. And I must also assure you the non-profit is beginning to pay well. So it's not that you're going to be eating out of a small bowl or you're going to be hard pressed for funds. Non-profit also, it pays you a reasonable sum. And I think you may want, I've seen so many who have left the corporate world to join the non-profit. So instead of doing it midway through a career, why don't you look at the option of starting with the non-profit sector?
Absolutely. With just a few days left until you bid goodbye to the YMCA, how emotional are you about it?
We would want that you look back in a certain degree of happiness and satisfaction. There are a great number of bonds that have been created. I had the good fortune of having a double posting at the boys' home. So that means I have two generations who have gone through my hands. They're all well settled and doing exceptionally well for themselves. Some have become coaches at different schools, some have set up their own business, and so that brings us a great deal of satisfaction. And we've seen success stories at our hostels, we've seen champions being groomed at the YMCA, whether it was table tennis or basketball. I've seen all that. Of course, it's been, if you get sentimental, you ought to, because after 40 years, you may find it difficult to mask your feelings. Mask is a pun intended. In the current times, all of us are wearing our masks, but we find it very difficult. In fact, my children have already predicted that the last day could be pretty emotional.
I'm sure. I can see you getting emotional even right now. So it has been such an honor and privilege to be speaking with you. Thank you so much, and we're so happy and proud to call you a Skålleague and have you amongst us.
My
Thank
pleasure
you so much.
and a privilege to have spent a few moments sharing my experiences. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and good luck to you.